Welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. And what I want to do is develop a framework which connects the teacher who constructs lesson plans with the administrator who observes those lessons in process and has to make a judgment as to the quality of those lessons. The focus is represented in the first page of the material that you have in front of you. And the focus claims to talk about the common language of the Penn Literacy Network and how we want to use the common language, the same language for constructing lessons, as well as teaching those lessons, as well as observing and evaluating those lessons. So that connects what teachers do to what those who are responsible for evaluating those lessons do. Let me look at the larger picture first of what we call the 5 reading, writing, talking processes across the curriculum. As you know, the Plainer Truths begins with a subtitle called Reading, Writing, Talking Across the Curriculum. The significance of that language, which I hope you will keep coming back to, is that this is not a basal reading program. It is not a curriculum which is based on the development of separate skills. Its focus is curriculum-wide. Its concern is with children thinking about ideas by virtue of their reading, writing, talking, in every subject in the curriculum, not just in the part called reading. In other words, the social studies program, the science program, the literature program. In each of these programs, where the focus is on the ideas and on transacting with these ideas, the students are learning to develop their skillfulness in language in a general way. And that means not just the reading skills, but reading, writing, talking skills as they learn about the significant ideas in each of their subject areas. Let me look at those 5 with you briefly. And we'll keep coming back to those. But the 5 are called Reading, Transacting with Text. And the subtitle is Before, During, After Reading Process. What we are looking at here, again, is how children experience their social studies, science, literature, content while they are being prepared for reading those texts, while they are actually reading those texts, and what happens after the reading of those texts. The second idea, the second reading, writing, talking process has to do with composing texts. Here we're concerned centrally with the writing process. We want students to be thinking of themselves as writers. And what writers do are to choose topics, to develop their topics, to refine their topics, to edit and proofread the work that they are doing. We want the students to be thinking of themselves fundamentally as writers, even at the very beginning of their experience in kindergarten and first grade. The third reading, writing, talking process we call extending reading and writing. Here, the best way to think about it is students are choosing their own books and reading in their own way and at their own pace. Here we are looking to developing lifetime reading process. The fourth reading, writing, talking process we call investigating language. And here, instead of practice and drill of a traditional sort, the students think of themselves as investigators, looking at sound-letter relationships, looking at sentence and grammatical relationships and vocabulary relationships as investigators. And the final reading, writing, talking process we call learning to learn. Here students are learning to become independent. Instead of being guided by the teacher continually, they learn to be self-reflective in their reading of their texts. Okay, so those five we're going to continue to come back to. They are the central ideas. Again, a reminder, this is not a conventional reading program or a separate writing drill program. It recognizes that ideas are learned by reading, writing, talking in texts and supplementary material in every subject, not just in the subject called reading. Underlying these experiences are four lenses of learning, as we call them. If you think of the reading, writing, talking processes that we were talking about, you will see that they are basically co-constructive. It means that the learner is engaged with other learners, the teacher and other classmates, in making sense out of significant ideas and relationships across the curriculum. One way to think about co-construction is to think of those experiences, whether teachers are having them when they are working together or students are having them when they're working together, is that this is a collaborative enterprise. Students are not just learning by themselves by doing exercises. They are learning by not only learning the facts, but dealing with those facts in terms of raising questions, bringing their own experiences to bear. For teachers, when they're working together, they are a learning community. So the notion of co-constructing is one of a community working to develop ideas together. Besides making meaning together, we see that these experiences are essentially social. The students are reading books that are written by people. The people in the text are people that they're learning about and communicating with. The communicating that's taking place in the classroom involves the students working with each other and with the teacher. The third of the lenses is that learning is language-based. In all of these experiences, we are reading, writing, talking, and listening. Not just practicing a reading skill, but engaging again in the central idea of this program, which is the use of reading, writing, talking across the curriculum. So when we look at lessons that we're preparing, or when we visit classrooms where lessons are in process, we're looking to see that the kids are involved in all of the language skills and not just answering questions to determine whether they are right or wrong. And finally, one of the lenses that we are very much concerned about is the human lens. We are very much concerned that students feel confident and comfortable while they're learning in their own skins. They need to feel success. They need to feel that they're working with others and that they are responsible for the success of their peers as well. What we see too much of and have seen too much of in the past is students having difficulty learning and being given grades so that if they are not successful, they are told that they are wrong. What we are trying to do is develop a sense of being right, being engaged, and being engaged with others and caring about the success of others as well as their own. So again, one way to look at a successful lesson is to say, was it meaning-centered? Was it social? Were others involved? And how were they involved? Was it language-based? Were they talking and reading and writing and listening and not just answering questions? And were they given opportunities to be successful, to feel that they were able to contribute to the learning of the group and to the success of others as well as their own success? The next page is simply points up something that I deal with in chapter 8 of the book. And I just want to point out that the basis for all of the work in this book is research evidence. And I want to talk a little bit about the nature of that research and why it is significant. The first kind of research is experimental, and we call that meta research. And the reason for that is that we're not just citing one or two or three pieces of research that support what we're trying to do. Meta research means that we look back over 15 years of research. We choose the best research and we take that together to inform us so that each of the reading, writing, talking processes is supported by meta-research of the experimental kind. Another kind of research is correlational research. Again, we report meta-research, not just the ones that support our point of view. But our point of view grows out of looking at the research. Another area of research are the beliefs and practices of outstanding teachers and school leaders. What is interesting here is that over the last 2 decades, what the best teachers and specialists in the field report have not been given due consideration. What has been looked at are the results on standardized tests, as if the tests and the categories in tests are the way to develop curriculum. And what is left out of this, strangely enough, are the beliefs of the best people, the best teachers, and the outstanding school leaders who support the reading, writing, talking processes. Another group, similar to the previous one, again, would you believe that the 22 professional associations, national associations, the National Council of Teachers of English, the National Council of Teachers of Math, of Social Studies, of Science, International Reading Association, etc. 22 of these groups in the 80s formulated a book called The Essentials of Education, indicating what was significant to them, and that was essentially ignored in 2 administrations who instead preferred to look at test results to generate a curriculum, something which failed miserably because we have no improvement in reading over a period of at least 20 to 30 years where that finding was relatively significant. But here, 22 professional organizations were ignored. I must say, a little self-consciously, that I was invited to write the chapter in the Essentials of Education on methodology in the classroom. And you will not be surprised that the reading, writing, talking processes were the center of the methodology that I proposed and that was supported by all of these professional associations. Furthermore, there are findings from international studies. We have continued to go lower and lower internationally. We are now about 45 or 50th internationally in our performance on tests. And national comparative studies indicate the same thing. Essentially, no progress for almost 2 generations now. The final area of research we call cross-disciplinary. These are research findings that are accumulation from any number of different research groups that I was able to put together to support studies, particularly in the area of investigating language rather than skill development by practice and drill. Now, if I might, I want to tell you how I might teach a lesson using these perspectives. It's a little story called Barton the Bully. I'm not going to teach the lesson. I'm going to indicate one of the ways that I might teach this little story to youngsters in first or second grade. Basically, it illustrates the first reading, writing, talking process, which has to do with what we do before reading, during reading, and after reading. It's a story called Barton the Bully. Now, before reading, and these are not the only things you could do with youngsters. Teachers will think of dozens of things to do that are supported by the research. My suggestions are these. I would ask the children to speculate a little bit on what they think a bully is before they ever get to the book, and engage them in a discussion. And sometimes I would ask them to break up into pairs and talk with each other about what they think a bully is, and then we'll come back together and talk about it. Then I might ask them to tell me about bullies that they know. What experiences have they had with bullies? And then finally, I might ask them, are you a bully sometimes? Can you think of times that you were a bully? Now, these are examples of engaging kids in talking about, thinking about, even drawing pictures or writing a bit about things they already know about. So it's not just factual learning. We are now engaging them in ideas that will prepare them for what happens while they're reading. And then while they're reading the book, I might have them do a picture walk first. Let's talk about what you think the story is by looking at the cover, the title, looking at page after page after page, and see what they get by interpreting the pictures. Encourage them to tell what they see. Then I would read the story aloud to them. If this is a kindergarten or first grade, I would read the whole story. And the reason for reading the story aloud is I want them to hear the intonation of a story. So instead of starting off by reading, asking them to read word by word by word, I want them to hear the melodies of speech. And then they would follow along and get the whole story as it appears in the book. Then I would have them reread it, echo reading. I would read a sentence, and then ask them to read it the way I did. Notice how I am focusing on meaning by having them hear the language, the intonation, and gradually by working this way I can come back to their reading the same material, but by that time they've had a very good sense of what the story is, different people's reaction to it, and by that time they're very much thinking about bullies. After we have finished reading together, I might ask questions like, why do bullies behave the way they do? And I think I would break them up into groups of 3 and have them talk about that for a while, and then come back after they've talked for a while and share with them what people in the class, what the students believe about bullies, and get some very interesting insights from students themselves. And finally, in my lesson, I would have them tell a partner about a bully they have known, or draw a picture of a bully, and then let them write it or draw it. So here I've used the framework of the before, during, after experience. I've engaged them in the meanings, the melodies, their experiences that they have had with the principal idea that's in this particular story. And just for a minute, let me reflect on what happens too often. The typical lesson might be to open a book and have kids read aloud, reading the first sentence word by word by word, missing entirely the point of the story and focusing too much on getting it right. I want them to get it right, but doing it in the traditional way won't work. Finally, I want to be thinking myself as I teach this lesson about how the experience was one of making meaning. How was it? How was it social? How was it language-based? And how was it human? I ask you to think about those questions every time you teach a lesson, prepare a lesson, look back and reflect on a lesson.